Today we're beginning a new series where I go over the answers to some of the most common questions I see in all of my videos. This one and today we're going to talk about how I can help you budget for long-term travel. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Ian, known as WanderBeard around these parts. And today, as I said, I'm starting a new sort of series, ongoing series, I guess, where I'm going to attempt to try and answer some of the questions once and for all that I receive on a regular basis. So the idea from this basically is on every video that I produce, I seem to get the same types of questions over and over. So I thought what I would do is I will do these as a two-part video for each type of question. Today, we're going to talk about budgeting. I've talked about budgeting in the past a little bit. I've had a couple of different videos from well over a year ago, but I thought it would be interesting to discuss it again from a fresh perspective, given that I have added more than another year to traveling since I talked about this the last time. Why this will be broken down into two parts is quite simple. I'm going to talk about some of the things that I do, and then I'm going to open it up to your questions. And then on Friday, I will then answer your questions in part 2 of this. First off, I will say I am not, and nor have I ever been great with budgeting or trying to plan long term. I have figured this stuff out as I go to try and help myself extend my time, manage my money, and make sure that I can have the best time possible with whatever funds I may have. Every country is different. Some countries are far more expensive than others, and I'll talk a little bit about that and how you can sort of adjust your expectations along the way. I see all the time people ask me, well, how do you save money if you don't have a job? Well, of course, obviously, you need some sort of job. You need some sort of income to be able to pay your bills, to survive, and then also save for any kind of trip that you want to do. But it doesn't have to be a standard job. People are doing all sorts of things today. Contract work. There are opportunities with sites like Fiverr that a lot of people use for, short-term contracts, one-off requests, those types of things. And it has worked out really well for them. I know people who are financing their entire travels through a site like Fiverr. There are also opportunities for remote work. There are opportunities for, volunteer stays where you're not necessarily making money, but through some of the volunteer work, they may cover your stay, your meals, those types of things. So there are a variety of different ways that you can save and build up a fund for travel. For me, it was kind of the sort of standard way to do it, I suppose. I worked in a corporate sort of job for a long time. Wasn't great with money. I, had lots of debts and things like anyone else. But when I made a plan to go on my trip, I stuck to it. And that's point number 2. Always stick to the plan. I think that what happens is a lot of times people tend to come up with these great ideas to execute on something. Could be travel, could be buying a car, could be whatever. And the problem isn't so much the plan. The problem is staying with the plan over the long term. We're talking basically 2.5 years of very structured spending, cutting out all the extra costs that I had, reducing things like subscriptions, eating out, whatever. All of those things compound to help you save money faster. If you have some credit cards, one of the best recommendations I have is something called the snowball method. It's, I think, fairly well known, but if you're not familiar with it, you basically have multiple debts, you arrange them, in order from smallest balance to largest. You then pay off the smallest balance one first with as much as you can while making the minimum payments on the others. That allows the first card or debt to be paid off very quickly. So let's say you have $1,000 a month to put towards debts. Instead of spreading it 3 ways or 4 ways or whatever equally, you pay the minimums on the higher ones and dump the rest on the lower one. Once the first one's paid off, you then roll that into the second one, and so on. That allowed me to go from basically just paying minimum balances and keeping everything afloat for almost a decade to paying everything off in the span of less than 2 years. Part of that, of course, as well, was that it then allowed me to save faster too. So in my opinion, one of the most important things you can do if you're going to do long-term travel, for example, is to make sure that those debts are paid off. You know, there's nothing worse than having to be traveling and also worrying about paying your credit card or, you know, a subscription that you don't need or something like that while you're away. It just adds more stress, more frustration, maybe that's the word for it, and cost. You know, it's something that, oh, I've always had a subscription for Netflix, or I've always had a subscription for Spotify or whatever. What you find is that if you're busy traveling, you don't end up having time for that stuff anyway. You end up paying for it every month, and yet your usage has dropped to maybe 5 or 10% of where it was. And so then I ask you, is that really worth it? Or would you be better off taking that money and using it towards whatever your goal is? You know, Netflix is, I don't even know. I say Netflix costs whatever. I don't know the answer to that because I've never been a Netflix subscriber. Not since its DVD days almost 20 years ago. But I also know that there are plenty of people out there spending $15, $20 a month on some Netflix streaming, and that's just one service. People have 5, 6, or more services in some cases, and that's eating up potentially hundreds of dollars a month. Is that really something you want to be doing if you have a goal that you want to achieve? So those are all things and ways that you can look at how to try and add money more quickly, pay off those debts, and some different ways that you can try and save through work or, you know, as I said, contracts, one-off jobs, whatever it might be. There's plenty of options out there. You just have to go and explore them. So on the budgeting side of things, one of the things you have to consider is where are you going to go? How long are you going to go for? And what are you willing to spend in each place? You know, I traveled through Canada, the US. I went to St. Pierre and Miquelon, you know, down through Mexico and the other Central American countries. And the prices in all of those places varied greatly, to say the least. Some were a surprise. Some ended up being much more expensive than even I expected. Some were cheaper. And some were, in my opinion, probably just not worth it. After seeing it once, one of those things where I'm like, okay, I'm good. I've seen it. You know, I don't need to see it again. Or the costs have increased so much that it doesn't make it worth it to go do it a second time. So figuring out where you want to go can be a real key to determining how long you can travel for, the types of activities you want to do, you know, things like that. So I'll give you an example. When you're in Nicaragua and you're traveling around, it is one of the cheapest places to visit in Central America. As a backpacker, as someone who likes to use local buses, stay in local places, it's fantastic. There's a great opportunity there to travel for an extended period of time, really see as much of the country as you want, and it doesn't kill your budget. And then you go across the border to Costa Rica to the south, and it goes from one of the cheapest to one of the most expensive countries in the region, just because of a border. So, one of the things that doesn't change, just because of an arbitrary line in the sand, if you will, is the things you can do, the activities, the sights, the nature. Nicaragua and Costa Rica have almost the same type of stuff. Mountains, they have, volcanoes, there are nature parks, there's, beaches on the Atlantic, there's beaches on the Pacific. And so you can do a lot of the same things that you would want to do in Costa Rica at a much higher price in Nicaragua. Depending on the country, you can go to parts of the country that are less touristed. When I was in Honduras, for example, everybody who goes to Honduras pretty well goes to Copan for the Copan ruinas. But most people don't go to a lot of other parts of the country. Lake Yohoa, La Esperanza, the capital, Tegucigalpa. Great places to check out. Had a wonderful time. And because they're not so much on the tourist paths, they were a little bit more affordable. So whenever I'm going anywhere, I always look up online the costs of places to stay, what an average meal might look like, cost of transportation, all of these things. And I certainly don't keep a rigid budget. I never have. I have a general idea of what a cost will look like over the course of a day for a place that I'm in, and I go with that. I think if you have a very rigid amount, let's say I can only spend $30 a day in a country. Some countries that's very doable. There are plenty of places around the world where you can go, you can spend $20 or $30 a day, stay in budget accommodations, eat local food, those types of things, and that's very manageable. But it shouldn't be a hard limit. Think of it more as an average. Some days you'll have less. Some days you might not do anything. You might be in your room and just read a book for the day. Or you might go down to a park and people watch. Well, that doesn't cost you anything. And then a couple days later, you want to go on an adventure, you want to go climb a volcano, something like that that might cost a little bit more money. It all evens out. So it's not about stressing about a specific number. It's just being mindful of how much you're spending and adjust as necessary. So one of the things I kind of do use to kind of keep track of costs and things is an app called Travel Spend. Now this is not sponsored in any way. There's no referral link down below for it. Nothing. It's just an app that I have found that I really like, that makes it really easy to keep track of day-to-day expenses. I mostly do that so that when I'm doing a video or a blog post on my website, I have that information there to refer to say, oh, I went to this restaurant, I had this meal, it was really good and it cost this much. Or I took, 4 buses in one day to go from San Salvador to Chinandega in Nicaragua. And I tracked the whole process, the cost of each step, so that when it came time to do a video about it, I wasn't just guessing on that information. I had it all readily available. So I use that every day when I'm on the road. I just quickly enter what I had, or where I stayed, or where I went, that cost, and that's it. And that gives you a running total, gives you an average per day. It's great. It's all I need to kind of keep an eye on things. The other question related to budgeting that I see is, how am I making money while on the road? Well, at the the majority of it is through YouTube. Obviously, a channel of my size is monetized. You know, that's why you see ads during the videos. You know, YouTube pays a portion of that to me every month. So it does help. It is certainly a larger part of the income that I bring in. I am not working separately of this. I don't have like a side gig or a side hustle or doing contracts of any kind. You know, I'm still able to travel on the savings that I built up after just 2 years and do it comfortably. And it's been great. You know, I don't have any secret backers or, you know, I don't have a business behind any of this. This is just me doing my thing on my own, out of my own pocket. And so anything I make on top of that just kind of helps to replenish that a little bit. If you'd like to know more about how to do that with a channel effectively, that's a video that perhaps I can do down the road as well. But in the end, budgeting is not a break point. And I think what happens is that a lot of people, when they start stressing about budgeting, they just throw in the towel. They're just like, this is just too much. I can't handle this. I don't know where to start. Those types of things. It doesn't have to be. And you don't have to do everything at once and leave for 2 years and everything. You can go for a weekend or go for a week-long trip somewhere, you know, and just kind of get that experience and try some different places and try some different things and figure out what you like. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I recommend it. You know, for me, one of the other ways that I built up some savings was when I sold most of my belongings. So I've talked about in the past how, you know, I lived in an apartment for almost 15 years. And during that 15 years, I accumulated a lot of stuff. And it came time for me to realize that I didn't need most of that stuff. And I don't miss any of it. So I ended up selling all that stuff to further build the savings to allow me to travel longer. And that's certainly an option, but it doesn't have to be the only option. It's just something that worked for me. So at this point, I will say to you, what questions do you have for me about budgeting for travel or for anything else? What are some of the tips and tricks that maybe you use that I haven't mentioned? Or anything else that comes to mind? Put those questions down in the comments. And then on Friday's video, I'll go through those questions and I'll answer them. I think that this two-way communication is beneficial for everyone. It allows me to talk directly to you. It allows you to ask me questions directly as well. And I think it kind of just helps with all of those different things that people may be wondering about. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like or those questions down in the comments below. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed, please do so. I'm getting very close to 40,000 subscribers, which to me is another milestone that I never ever imagined hitting. So thank you to everyone who has so far. If you would like to support me further, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. Nothing is certainly required. It's all optional, but there's Patreon under WanderBeard, and there's a couple of donation links here on the screen if you are interested in doing that. But there's no pressure. It's just a nice way to say thank you. I would certainly appreciate it. And everything goes back into this project and onward to my next trip. And remember, life is short. Wander. And I'll see you in the next video.